Values and Vibes. Today we're going to talk about persistence as a value. What daily actions do you take that demonstrate your persistence? If you don't know answer about that, stay with us to find out more. Hello and welcome to Values and Vibes. Today with Louisa Bulow and Tia Lancaster, we're going to talk about persistence as a value. Louisa, can you tell us the definition of Revalue 180? What is persistence like a value? As a value.
Yeah. Our value of persistence definition is to be resilient in the face of defeat, exhaustion, and or troubles.
That could define us at Revalue 180, and maybe it defines most startup environments if you really truly love and believe what you're doing. Because I think every day that I wake up, if I either feel like crying or like going for a run or a walk just to get out my frustrations, but there's at the root of all of it is always that sense of never giving up, that sense of just, driving for results. And I think that essentially, like I said, with most successful startups, persistence will be the reason that we become the #1 pre-hiring assessment tool out to date. So that's what I think about persistence.
Yeah.
Yes, fingers crossed.
I was just looking up our most recent kind of activity results, and both Tia and I have persistence in our final 8, and Milena, you have it also as one of your final values, but in the penultimate 16. But for me, persistence is just so important in my life, and I actually think I'm someone that emotionally can get so easily disappointed, and that makes you naturally want to give up. That's part of my personality. I'm like, oh, it hasn't worked, I'm not doing this, I'm starting again and doing something else. But equally, my motivation of persistence is trying to keep that in check with everything I do. So I'm like, I can't, because I need to get to the next thing and I need to try. And it's funny because I would say I'm not good at persistence, but I've had it in my final 8 for the past 3 times I've taken.
Persistence and regulation, right?
Yeah.
Is it what is it? Does it support the forest blocker? Just wondering. Forest blocker it is.
You support your persistence and you block it because it's opposed by hawk. So you're quite interesting with your persistence. So when forest is out, it's helping you because you are someone, you will find the answer, and you'll get on Google and you're gonna find what you need to find. And that's your forest. But then hawk somehow can come in and oppose that, make that more difficult.
That makes sense. I mean, it's good I have hawk, because then maybe it helps me get over being too persistent when something is incorrect. Did you choose to have forest, Milena? I don't remember.
Yes, of course. I think forest is I'm always doing that to myself. Can Louisa explain forest blocker just for listeners to know what is forest blocker?
Forest is called forest because you can't see the forest for the trees, basically. And it is, if Tia was a blocker, if her body was a blocker, she would be the epitome of the forest blocker. Because from that day I met Tia, I would always say she's like a zoomer inner, was what I would call it. So she will find that one thing and try to kind of, what we would say is eliminate that risk or eliminate the uncertainty around it. But essentially what you're doing is you're honing in on details to the point that, like, when did I even get here? Probably to a certain extent. So you can end up on a bit of a tangent to find the answer to one thing when actually maybe it didn't matter as much as you wanted.
Yeah, maybe. And I mean, no, for sure, not just maybe, but for me, I even think when I think about the genesis of Revalue 180 and starting the company, and I knew, like, just in 2020 when I was walking with Colin during the pandemic, and we left London for those couple years during that time. And we're walking in Miami, and we were talking about really the best place for this was as a pre-hiring assessment tool, and I was just so intent on having to build it as a well-being model first, because I felt like that was my kind of forest. Like, I knew that we could curate, retain, and maximize, but I thought before I could do anything, we had to be able to retain talent through increasing well-being. And sometimes, I just said this the other day, walking with Colin in London, I was like, I wonder if I drove too much, if I wasted time possibly on spending so much time getting it out there in the world, as a well-being tool. But I think that also just part of the process, you know what I mean? And I think of possibly of any startup, and I guess I always think of one of Maria's, one of my favorites of her exes, Mikey, who's this just very entrepreneurial soul. And I remember him always talking about startups. He's really a genius, and Milena knows him. And I remember him walking around the kitchen, and it was early days of Evaluate 180. He's like, so what do you think, Tia? You're gonna have to pivot soon? And I was like, Mike, I don't think I'm ready to pivot yet. I just got to develop like what I have. So the other day when I was talking to Colin, I was like, I think I'm ready. I think that's the pivot that Mikey was talking about. So
But that's persistence, Tia. That's you pushing forward. And even if you needed to check the well-being route, was actually, because we are a
we are, and it's the
tool.
root of the model. And that's what's
Yeah.
so great about it, is even while we hire, we're solving for happy in a lot of ways, because even that person isn't right for the job, they get to leave with a kind of this gift of going through the process. And we get to then develop talent in and around the hiring person for the life cycle. But maybe I could have like pivoted a little sooner. Who knows? But it's fun either way. The persistence is the journey.
Yeah.
I completely agree. But if you see that somebody have a persistent as a value in like final 8, what what position you would recommend for somebody who in the company? What would be the best position for those people who are really valuing persistency?
I
I
mean,
would say it's quite a good trait, or trait, it's not a trait, but like a quite good motivator for anyone who's in a management position or a leadership position, because you're dealing with a lot of things, but you're also probably someone who enjoys a bit of a hierarchy because you've been given a leadership role and you're probably looking to the next one, and also you want to tick boxes and you want to get to the next task. So being able to be persistent and deal with a lot of the adversity that comes in and a lot of the struggles and troubles that come, being in an important role like that, it would help be helpful.
I agree. I also think that you have to provide the persistence of good leadership and of just having the positive attitude, because getting to the end of a project can be difficult and reaching that goalpost. So I think that if a leader is persistent in the way he or she approaches the team, and the praise and the constructive criticism and all of those things, I think persistence pays off. So yes, I agree. I also think that probably for somebody who very much sits in its posing zone of openness, a creator or a creative would have to be very persistent, because most likely they have Hawk and they might even have Maverick. And so that means that they are drawing these conclusions and they have all this big confidence in these amazing ideas that change the world, such as iPhone and Apple and, and Elon Musk and all of those people that are creating things all the time. And so I think that if you don't have a little bit of or both, persistence and kind of this adventure, creativity, excitement of these grand ideas. So it's funny because like I said, those kind of values are kind of sitting in opposition to each other. But I think in order to be one of these great creators and great innovators, if you're not persistent, you're never going to get there, because you're going to have a lot of failures from A to Z, from, beginning to some form of success.
But would you tell that, like, for me, from my opinion, it's like when I'm persistent about something, I'm always thinking about long term and what is my ideal situation, like, because I think so many situations, it's like up and down, up and down, up and down, it's like a heart rate. You're alive, and I'm like, okay, let's just keep on being alive, even if it's down, let's just focus on the goal. What is the goal of this going up and down? And just like, that's life. It's not going to be perfect anytime, like, but when I speak with people who are like, oh, I'm persistent, but they give up so easily. They give up literally when it's like 2-3 bad situations in a row. They're like, I'm not for this. I'm going to quit. I'm going to change the company. Maybe
Exactly.
it's, like, so do you think that people who are persistent, they are okay with, like bad situation, bad circumstances, and also they're like, they don't blame others? What is the blocker when you blame others, Louisa?
Tag.
Maybe they don't have tag a lot.
I think they possibly could still have tag and overcome tag with their persistence, probably, because I think that sometimes you might blame others, but you're still so angry with yourself. Typically, people who have tag know that they have fault involved in something, but in order for them to be persistent and move ahead, they can't take on too much of that blame because that would be really hard for them to bear. So I think that it's probably one of those honing type things. And I also think that persistence is like probably one of the most important things you can instill into your children as a parent, because there's going to be teams that they join, activities that they want to do and beg you for to have, pets that they beg you for and then don't want to take care of. And if you can't, you have to teach them persistence. Okay, yes, you might not like this now. You might not even ever like it, but you've got to persist until the proper time to enter or exit. You have to persist until the end of the semester. I don't care if you don't like math because you have to take it. You know, it's one of those things that I think it makes the difference between raising a resilient child and not. I think resilience comes down to a lot of persistence.
Yeah. But it's that idea of, was it the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step? There's that like Chinese philosopher who said it, I think. And it's knowing that this is what you said, Milena, I look to the long term, but actually we have to break that down into digestible chunks in order to get through things with persistence. And also I don't think I'm particularly good at being persistent. I think I've got better, but it's always been a motivator for me. So it's always driving me, like I have to get through this, and things that have happened in my life, you have to get on to the next thing, and you have to. Yeah. So if you look too far in the long term, it's only going to hinder, I think, getting there.
I agree. I do think you have to set small goals. I mean, I think about it a lot with like Victoria being a writer. I mean, it takes, God, who knows, to write 300 pages of a novel and then be rejected. I mean, that's the ultimate, like, how do you like persist? How do you then write that next novel? But because people are telling you, agents and publishers, that they love your writing, but just isn't quite the right story that they want. I mean, to me, I think that's why I think it goes so hand in hand with creatives in so many ways, successful creatives, because at least like persistence in, I feel like in the non-creative world, there's usually some monetary gains, like you get small promotions, you get kind of those more digestible like goals. Do you know what I mean? So I do think that's such a really good point, Louisa.
Yeah, and you know, it goes to that amazing video we always watch of Steve Jobs when he talks about founding Apple and then being basically kicked off by the board that he put together, essentially. And then did he get cancer after that and overcame that, and then thought, well, I've got to do something else with my life. I'm going to create a new company, and created Pixar. And, you know, it's just that there are incredible people in this world like him, for whether you like him or not, for whatever, in terms of his persistence and what he achieved. That's, I think, a great example of this value. And he's such a good
example, because like, I agree, whether people believe he's a good person or a bad person or whatever they think, I don't think that matters. I think he worked at it every day. Like he talked about how he looked in the mirror every morning and said, you know, as a person I wanted to be today, if I wasn't going to be that person tomorrow, just striving is persistence. And also something interesting on that I just read the other day is he did something really interesting. Whenever he couldn't solve a problem, and it's funny because I resonated with that, not resonating with him as being like him, but this very thing is he always got up and would go for a fast, like walk, 10-minute walk. If he was really struggling with a decision, and found that like he found his best solutions while moving. And I do the same. Like, I feel like that's when I usually call one of you girls, like, or Rohan or something, and about something I'm thinking about, because usually things that I can't put together in my mind when I'm sitting in front of my computer happen during that time. So I got to believe that that's part of his persistence. And now that it's been proven in science that when you're moving your body and your heart rate's going up, scientists are coming back and saying that Steve Jobs' idea of movement, when your brain is at like kind of like in a locked place and you can't solve the problem, that unlocks it, kind of that movement, that blood flow. So so I think that some of that goes along with his persistence, you know, if we're talking about someone who probably really symbolizes persistence.
I have an example of maybe overusing persistence as a value. I found that a lot of people who, when I was talking with them, okay, company it's one, but relationship is another thing, that you're trying to be persistent. even if it's a bad choice, partner,
Mm.
you know, like, and you're trying to, you can see a goal, like I want to be in a long relationship. I'm going to be with, because of the kids, I'm going to just be persistent, even if it's like bad, even if it's like nice couple of days and then it's bad, whatever. But is that like overusing persistence? And sometimes persistence can be bad for you when you're
I
like,
don't think, I see exactly what you're saying. I mean, I guess I wouldn't call it overuse of persistence. I would call it misuse. I think
uh-huh.
that, I mean, I wouldn't, but for the grace of God, go I. I can't judge somebody who's sitting in these terrible circumstances or relationships, especially ones of abuse, where you're right. They have a couple good days and then they're like, oh, it's fine. But there's all these little victims in the circle that are happening to children, parents, friends, siblings that are also kind of in the kind of, aftermath of these decisions. So I think that persistence is just, I think, misplaced. So the persistence maybe should be, how do I get out and create like a better, like a better situation for myself and for those I love. So I don't think, I think it's just rechanneling that person. Because I think that you're right. I think that some of those people that do stick into those situations are because they don't want to fail and they want to be persistent and they believe in that person. They're going to persistently try. But I think that that's just a little bit of misplaced maybe belief, and you got to change the goalpost. I think. What is your goal? Is your goal? I don't know. That's kind of what I think.
But I think what you're saying is right, because persistence sits in regulation, and we know people who overuse or misuse values in regulation or are too heavy in that zone become rigid and they become inflexible and they don't look for change because it's uncertain is normally what it is. Change is uncertain and I can't quite put my finger on it. So therefore, let's just go with what I'm doing because I understand that framework.
It's scary. It's scary.
I understand my structure, so let's keep it where it is. So that persistence coming out like that is actually, maybe it's easier to be in what I've got than to look for something I don't know.
And I actually wonder what you would think, Louisa. Maybe it's even a little bit of, I mean, and this is, I'm not a PhD clinical psychologist here, but maybe it's a little bit an idea of like that fight or flight. So when you're in situations that really aren't healthy for you, you're always in fight or flight mode. And fight or flight mode probably also motivates you to be persistent. I'll keep going on. I'm in like, you know what I mean? I can do this. I can get through it. I mean, I'm doing it. Just 5 days of crap. And then it's usually the situation is better. You know what I mean? Or I'll get through this little goal and then it'll be better. So I think a lot of that could be like fight or flight energy. But
I do just think if your values are sitting in regulation too heavy, you're almost just comfortable with where you are because you're too scared or maybe you don't want to kind of look outside of the box you live in, which can be helpful. It's good to have values and regulation that create structure in order, but too much of that, you almost probably don't even let your fight or flight come out because you're like, maybe it's easier where I am.
Does persistence support anchor as well?
No, I don't think so.
Because we have a couple of values, that are repeat.
Yeah, not persistence, no. But because I have anchor, but I don't think it influences my persistence. My anchor block is going back to my initial judgment on something, and I have this idea of that's just what I thought, so I'm just going to stick with that because it's easier. But
but sometimes you are just holding something so bad, like even in position company, and you're like, oh, let's give them a chance. You understand others. You're like, maybe it's not their day. Like I just need to fight. I need to be persistent. I need to be like, like in Greek mythology, like I need to be tougher. I need to. It's just pain. Like I just need to go through. And then I read something that you maybe want to find like maybe funny. We can check if this is true, but I heard that in Japan, if you want to change a job, all the things that you did on previous, it's like it's
erased.
Erased, so it doesn't exist. So that's why when they choose the job, they're staying and they're so persistent. I think as a country, I think they're like persistent value, like they want to do it like every day and it's going to be perfect, and it's going to be perfect in a long term.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that does make sense, but I think that's why you see the Japanese people like sleeping on the street on the top of their like briefcases because of that. And that is when we talk about how values, when they're overused, become negatives in your life. And then, I mean, if you're so persistent that, or these young people are reading about like at JP Morgan and, EY and I think, you know, there's been like several deaths and suicides and stuff of these young people. I mean, it's their persistence, right? Because they're not giving up. They've been given this great opportunity to have this amazing job, but they're in a situation that their well-being is being affected. But
Mhm.
how do you know, that's a hard thing when you're young, especially to reconcile, because you've been raised a certain way and you don't give up. But when it's severely affecting your mental health and you're not sleeping at all and you're finding yourself very depressed, you know,
It's interesting because it's kind of like we talk about Japan. That's a collectivist culture where it's all about prioritizing social harmony and representing your company and representing the group and maybe avoiding confrontation to a certain extent. I would wonder if it'd be really interesting one day to see if that then mapped onto the east side of the atlas, because that's very much global vision regulation and what we're talking about. So there's also quite a hierarchical structure in Japan, and the beauty of that is there's a lot of respect, a lot of it,
Mhm.
more than from what you hear you would see. I've never been to Japan, but you know, from things you
oh
read about
yeah, it is when you're there.
cultures
It's
than we
unbelievable.
have in the Western world. But is there therefore too much of that at times? Or if
Maybe
you're not highly
they,
regulated, how do you fit into that? How
they
does that
can't even really show, like it's very rare. I was out to dinner in Japan with some of Colin's colleagues and they talked about how like even they don't even they can't they're not even really allowed to show anger like in a meeting or with a coworker. And I think you're right. So those are every one of those values to the greater good and to also to to self kind of to self-moderation are like to the excess. So
very heavy
maybe that's why they're
regulation?
such big drinkers, because they're huge drinkers there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a big drinking culture in Japan. Supposedly the young people are changing that around a bit, but didn't look like it when I was there, but you never know. I mean, I think the trend is they're not drinking as much. Yeah. And also it's offensive. You cannot turn down drinks when you're in Japan. You're offending them and their cultural ways.
Oh my God.
So if you're a young employee, it's almost like being in a fraternity all the time.
Oh my
Like
God.
sorority, like
That's the social framework side of
yeah.
regulation as well. So there is a how things have always been, and tradition and things like this, I would imagine, come out strongly, because if that's how it's been done, we respect that and we're going to follow that. But that's where persistence is a value that falls into all of what we're talking about, because it's in regulations. There is the overuse of it, but I think when it's harnessed effectively, it's a really great value to have, especially when you're starting out in the workplace too, because you deal with a lot of things
Mhm.
when you first start out and things you don't know, and God knows what else. Everyone probably has a bias that sits against them in a way. So I think persistence is really effective value to have when you start out work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because those first month or so of a new position or a new job, or God, it's always hard. You like kind of want to leave. You know, oh hi, I'm so and so. I said that to Sophia. I was like, just I'm Sophia. I don't have my login yet. It doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah,
do you have
so
your
funny.
emails?
Yeah.
It doesn't work yet. You know what I mean? It's just right there. You got to be persistent because that's all very like nerve-wracking.
But how I see it as well, and I don't know if this is just my take on persistence. Obviously, our model is very subjective in how you see the values, but I see it as very positive and very forward thinking. So when I think of persistence, I think of where I'm going next. I don't think of necessarily what had happened before
Mhm.
and why that brought me
I
back.
agree. That's a
It's actually
positive, like, yeah,
the
movement
next step.
forward.
And when I had that
Yeah.
a family member in rehab, a lot of the group work they did and the individual work they had to do these sessions was based on, okay, what next? And I think that's
Yeah.
persistence.
I agree, and you're right. And the model is rooted in that. I built it originally out of positive psychology. That you can't change the past. There are many mental health professionals that can help people revisit traumas and whatnot and work through those things. But in my mind, these models of being mindful and being present help you to kind of push to the next, push forward, and that is the very definition. Because don't we talk about even read the definition again, Louisa?
Definition: to be resilient in the face of defeat, exhaustion, and/or troubles.
Yeah. So true. I'm telling you guys, it's so interesting to hear the definitions of these because they seem so kind of banal, like banal almost, like everyone knows the definitions of these words. But when I was researching them for values, like, and you look in Merriam-Webster's and look kind of at all different ways that these words are defined. I mean, it's truly, I mean, truly interesting, the definitions of these words and, you know, what it actually, the impact of struggles in people's lives and how it takes persistence.
Yeah,
know?
I mean, the face of exhaustion. I need to not keep having weddings every weekend because
Exactly. Exactly. Or you can't even you can't like, and Milena, just thinking the face of like, oh my God, when you have to, you know, you have this baby, this toddler that demands so much attention and energy, and you're like, oh my God, persistence is like at the very root of like motherhood. Cause you're like, I gotta get up and do it all again tomorrow. And gonna have a newborn baby. But it's amazing how you can do things with one arm as you have more children.
No,
And
honestly, only thing that motivates me to be persistent, because I think I'm a persistent person, because I'm not the smartest, I'm not the most beautiful, you know. But if I'm persistent, I'm persistent. So
I
when
think you're all those things
I think
personally.
you're all of the above.
I think persistence is just persistence is another nice quality too.
Yeah,
Or
but you know, when somebody said, I would always push that, because whenever I want to motivate, say, to lose weight, to go on a diet or something, I'm always like, what you can do if you do this in 3 months, you can look like this. So if you start to learn some other language, in 3 months you can be fluent. You know, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this every day.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this, because that's how I motivate myself. You know,
right, because you're goal oriented and
yes,
values underpin goals.
yeah.
So if you have the right values underpinning the goals that you want to achieve, you will achieve them. Okay.
Okay, so I just want to ask you last question about persistence as a value. If we think about persistence, do you know any example that you did and that you see, oh my God, I'm valuing this value so much and I was so persistent in this, I'm proud of myself. So we can give example to young people, young crowd, that they should stay and be persistent.
Go ahead, Louisa. You can go first.
I'm going to go with the first thing that came to my mind because that's always easier, isn't it? When I ran the London Marathon, I think I gave myself a discipline and routine that probably isn't as natural to me. I'm someone who does like a bit of structure in my life, but I'm also I like change as well. So I can kind of dip between the two. But in order to run it, I knew I needed to do certain runs and schedule certain things in. And I would wake up and I really didn't want to get up. And because it was the hot summer in the UK a few years ago, because they moved the marathon to October because of the pandemic, I had to get up at like 6 a.m. a lot of the days to start my run, because otherwise it was going to be too hot to kind of get through. And then on the day, you get to a point where you hit a wall and you just push through it and you get to the end. And the feeling at the end of it was pretty amazing. So I was very proud of myself on how disciplined I really was, just because it's not as natural to me as perhaps it could have been. So that's just I guess one thing.
I think that's a great example. I mean, I also ran the marathon, and I do think that is such the perfect example of persistence, because you just have to, you just have
It's
to.
probably the textbook example, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. But I mean, until you've actually done one, you really don't quite know. And especially when you're me, and I looked at, and I thought it was 21 miles and it was 21 kilometers. So it was very sad for me to realize that I had many more miles to go, and I thought I was getting close.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're only
Mm.
halfway through at that point.
Yeah. Wasn't that good a feeling. But anyways, so persistence really had to kick in. I would say what comes to mind for me, like individually, I mean, there's many things I can think of with my children and adversities they faced and teaching them or helping them get through with persistence, but probably be my own kind of illness in a sense, because like I was always, like I always say, I was the healthiest, almost dead person. I mean, no one was going to really find out, you know, I was, you know, internally bleeding to death for 10 years. And basically I'd been to the best specialists around the world, and they basically told me to live my life in moderation and good luck. So to me, that was a lot of persistence. And like, I'm super offended when people are like, oh, that's Dr. Google. I'm like, well, sometimes you have to be Dr. Google and have to, you know, and read as much as you can. I mean, so much so that I had a friend who became like, he was one of my doctors. He's a hematologist, oncologist, genius, Harvard guy. He actually gave me his medical, kind of ID, his password and his check-in number, so I could get into journal articles, because he told me that I gave him better information than his residents did. So forest blocker there, but honestly, persisting kind of through that really almost really finding my disease myself and then getting the right doctor, I think persistence is something that can keep you alive in this life too, as well. Like, just in general. So I think,
Maslow's triangle.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, totally.
It's
Okay.
how we stay alive as humans.
Right.
Get yourself food and water.
Right. And figure it out. What
Yeah.
about you, Milena?
Honestly, I was thinking about this question because I wrote every value and I have question always prepared. And then I was like, oh yeah, I was, like I finished law school that I don't like. I finished it only because of my parents. I didn't go to psychology that I would love to finish, but I was persistent to finish that because I started. When you started, you need to finish. And then I was thinking, no, I think that's not a perfect example. I think perfect example of persistence is that I'm waking up every day and try to be kind to people.
Yeah, well, no, it's true.
It's truly fight for me because sometimes I'm so grumpy and I'm so lazy. Like naturally, I'm grumpy and lazy. I don't know why, and then I'm fighting every day to make a bed, to wash all the dishes. Like to be kind, to be. And then I was like, I think that's like really really work for me. For somebody, it's
Yeah.
like naturally. And then I'm always trying to not, like always try to, my house need to be clean, like my emails, I need to read all the emails, I need to answer everybody, like, because for me, if you don't answer 24 hours, for me, it's rude, like, so
Yeah.
those small things, I think I'm persistent. And that's
No, that's amazing because
That's juggling. That is
and that's
hard.
and also just being, looking, it's like your strengths and weaknesses and really kind of the ideal part of kind of our model in a sense is like finding those things that are challenging to you and then coming up with ways to be better so I think that that's actually a great one because that's literally that's a day-to-day persistence and all those little things, but all those little things add up. So I think that's a great example.
Yeah, and I would give example to anybody who is like young and think they think they're lost. They have so many tests to do. Like just start doing it, and it's gonna be done. Just start.
Just make your bed. That's why there's a whole book on it.
Yeah,
Make your
yeah. Bed. It's like example, because I believe how is your surrounding, it's how is in your mind. So if it's not house tidy or it's like if it's not clean or if so many dishes or something, I think it's messy in my mind, and I have already messy in my mind. So
yeah.
I just want to move.
Agreed. I agree with that. I
And
agree with that.
that's not my true nature. I think
Yeah.
I'm lazy and
You're just enacting discipline in your life, which
Yeah.
takes persistence.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly.
I would say in discipline, actually, in a sense, I guess that to be disciplined, I guess maybe that would be more the action part of persistence in some ways, because you have to have discipline in your life in order to be persistent about something. So that's interesting.
I
Well,
think it creates discipline. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
One begets the other for sure.
Thank you so much for this value because I love this value, honestly, and I appreciate that we spent nice half an hour talking about really, really good value. And stay with us to find out more about other values. And see you, ladies. Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.